Alright, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to go over control arms and how to replace ball joints. So in previous videos you've heard us talking about the upper control arm bolts and how you can snap them, and when you do you're going to have to fix some stuff. So I've broken them 3 times, and so with that I've had to replace control arms every single time they've broke. And so I'm going to show you what the bent control arms look like as I have them sitting here in front of me. And then also ball joints, which I've changed several. I actually thought I had a new one yet, but apparently I don't. I've changed them all. So Blair, I'll be hitting you up to order some more. But so starting out, for one this is a lower control arm. Okay, now if you didn't know, they're the same on both sides of the car. So it's literally just one way or the other way. Okay, and then the ball joint obviously is universally placed in there, and so it can be again either way. The only thing that really is your determining factor is your pin, okay, which I have one and I'm going to show you how to remove it. Sometimes they get stuck, okay, but so then this is the pin. If your ball joint were in there, this is the pin that fits in your ball joint, okay, and then that is how you actually bolt it through. All right, so then this would be a piece. This thing is ramped, and so this would be for your upper, for, you know, as an example, but just as an example, it's ramped, it goes on there if this were your upper. But so in any case, I'm going to kind of go through all that in this video and show you how to be able to press these things out and press them back in, and show you what a bad one looks like and how you can tell, okay? But anyway, so I'm going to start off with this control arm right here. So if you can see, I'm going to try to hold it level here and kind of get an idea for how twisted that thing is. You notice they don't really line up when that thing's sitting level. This one is way high. This one is way low, okay? So it literally just wrenched itself. So there's one example of a bent control arm. So you want to make sure you're looking for those types of things, even when you don't break your upper control arm bolts. But this happened when I broke upper control arm bolts. I bent the lower control arm, because what happens is that upright that's sitting on here that has your hub and everything, when those bolts break, that whole thing is going to torque, and it torques so hard that it literally bent this one down. So that's one example. Now the second example, again, another lower control arm. You know, obviously this one still has the bolts and hardware and everything in it, but so this one, actually, if you look at it, this side here has a bit of a ramp in it. I know I'm over extenuating it in my hand here, but it's supposed to be straight, all right? And so it's ramped like this, which makes this be angled at a downward angle. But again, it's straight that way, so that's perfectly fine. But then the second thing is, remember I told you about looking for cracked paint? You see that? The cracked paint? So that took a torsion load right there, and you could see it actually cracked all the paint and gave me a little bit of a bubble right here, okay? So again, another example of a bad control arm. So these are the type of things you want to be looking for when you're doing your maintenance. And then obviously you want to get down, make sure that these things are straight. Make sure that your arms on both upper and lower control arms, both of your arms are nice and straight, obviously in their angles, but they don't have any bends in them, okay? So now here would be an example of, now this is a used ball joint, and I'll tell you, I replaced this thing, one of these I replaced at Mid-Ohio because I had a little bit of wiggle in it. Now it's hard to feel the wiggle when you don't have the leverage of it being mounted in the car, grabbing a hold of the tire. But I had enough wiggle to where I could see grease in this edge out here. I could actually see grease going squish, squish, squish in, squish out, depending on which way I was pulling it. So that told me that I had some play in there, and I can feel ever so slightly. But what I wanted to show you is, we'll just say this is a new one. You notice how I can move this? Okay, it moves pretty easy, okay? That's what a new one feels like, okay? A new one's gonna move easy. Now here's an example of what a bad one's going to feel like. I couldn't move that thing. I'd have to stick it in a vise. That thing will not budge. And so you can actually look on the back side, see how that's mushroomed out right here, and it's nice and even. And again on this side, if you look close, you can see it's mushroomed. Hopefully I'm holding that good for the camera there. But and then here's another one that is bad, and again if you look at it close, you can see it's mushroomed. I think this one actually is, the whole housing of it is torqued a little bit. But that just goes to show you the loads this thing will take when you snap those bolts. Okay, so you got to be really careful, all right? You want to make sure you check these things, and you know, honestly, whenever you have something, a joint that takes a hard hit like that, these things are cheap. I mean, how much would it cost you if this thing came apart going down the track because you decided to just risk it? So, you know, I think, again, preventative maintenance when you have a break is just to replace all the joints on that perspective wheel that might have taken a load, okay? Or that you could obviously feel any bits of play. Now, you know, this upper control arm, this was from an upper, the passenger front at Mid-Ohio, and I can't remember exactly where this one came from. This one has obvious play in it. This might have been from the 3, so these might be the 3 different times that I've broken those upper control arm bolts. These 2 got completely destroyed. This one just has some wiggle in it, but the actual outer shell and everything looks nice and solid all the way around. Doesn't have any big deformities or any deformities at all. But you could feel, if you grab it and grab and just give a little wiggle, I could feel a little lateral movement in there, okay? And then again, this one, I can't really feel the movement much, maybe just a little bit, but this was the passenger front upright that I realized at Mid-Ohio at the Grid Life between day 1 and day 2. I had a little play, so I just went ahead and popped it out, and I could do these in my trailer in like 5 minutes. Super easy to do. Obviously, easiest thing to do is take the control arm off and be able to put it in a vise, and so I'm going to show you now how to actually do it and how to get these out, because a lot of times these don't want to come out. Obviously, this is your pin, you've got a nut on each side, and so you might be able to get the one nut off to actually disassemble the system, but to get the other one out, sometimes you need to figure out how to hold this solid so you can get this one out. And so I'm going to show you a really quick, easy way that's safe and you're not going to hurt anything that's important. All right, so what I'm going to show you now is, here is a upper control arm, okay? Now I'm pretty sure that this one is no good. I really need to compare it to another new one. But obviously what you can see here, these rubs right here, this was the first one that I ever broke. I was at Road Atlanta. I spun in 10B, if you're familiar with the track, and went across the curbing with very aggressive curbing at a straight, not in the right angle. And the curbing was on the side of the tire, maybe even touched the wheel. It was a lot of load, and literally just snapped those bolts. And then this is what happened when it actually penetrated the tire, because I didn't even know they had broken. But the pit marshal checked the car, didn't notice anything different, and the reason being is because this was assembled with this on there, like that, and this is what goes up against your upright. So when it's sitting on the car, it'd be just like this. All right, and so this essentially sat right in its original position. This is where your bolts go in, and so it sat right in its original position, holding the tire at the right angle, so the pit marshal couldn't see that there was something broken. When I went up turn 1, I knew something was wrong. I was coming down this lower S's there, and it had pulled away and then pushed into the tire, and this end of this literally just dug into the tire until it blew the tire out and went inside of the tire. And so that is what all of these marks are from, is literally just from wearing inside the tire. It marked up the inside of my wheel. It didn't kill the wheel, so that was good. But I did replace it. When I look at this thing, I do think that this end is torqued. Both of these ends seem like they're torqued in, but I really need to get a new and compare it to a new one. I just ordered a new one and replaced it as a complete, thinking that I could use this as a spare. And then after I broke the bolts twice more and messed up those 2 lowers, now I'm really questioning on whether this thing is perfectly straight. So the next time I take one of my uppers off, I need to put it up and against it and make sure that it is. But essentially what I'm going to show you here is this is the piece that goes on your upright. So this is where those upper bolts, this is where they snap from, okay? And so this is shaped where this is bigger here and smaller here, okay? And so if this was going on the car, this is pointing down, okay? This is your upper control arm pointing down in the rear, all right? And so then this bad boy right here is going to go with the wider end right here going up, okay? And so hence you can't even put it on backwards if you wanted to, because you're not even going to be able to get the threads out of the bottom of it, okay? But so you're going to put it on just like that, and then essentially those upper bolts go here, and you have obviously another nut that goes down here that looks just like this. You only have 2 nuts that hold your suspension. I think it's an M12 and M10. I don't know, I have the specs, but there's only 2 nuts. Rush sells them. You can order them online from other places, and these are Nylock, obviously. But so again, same nut, top and bottom. So I've already got that off. These come off pretty easy. If they get stuck, you could use a pickle fork like you would separate a ball joint to go in there and break these free if need be. Also probably just a big heavy screwdriver or a pry bar, you could probably pop these off. But so what I like to do is, after I get that off, I like to put this in a vise, okay? And so you can see the nut already, so I'm not going to show you that part. I want to show you from this side. So I'm going to put this thing in a vise. I'm not going to crunch super hard, but I mean these things are pretty solid. So I'm just going to make sure that it's held in place. Now the problem is when I put an impact on this nut on the back side here, it's just rotating this. It won't actually loosen it up, okay? So what I need to do is I need to hold this. So if you look at these, and I'm going to hold one up to the camera, okay? So obviously this thing is in there just like that. So if you look at it, and you can actually see, I've already got a couple marks right here on this. I'm going to make sure that this is being in the camera. Yep, sorry about that. So you can see I've got a couple marks there already. Okay, and that is where I'm grabbing a hold of this with vice grips. Okay, now the reason why I'm grabbing there is because, as you notice, when it's in here, there's nothing that's touching. Okay, you're not going to hurt this thing, because what this other sleeve piece that we were just looking at, it slides on, but you can see it doesn't actually get anywhere up near that end. So you're good. This whole area, you are fine to grab with a vice grip. I do try to grab it on the flat edge. Obviously, I don't want to mar this edge up, but as you can see, I didn't touch it this time. And I believe this one I've replaced. No, this is a new one. So this is a brand new one. I haven't touched this one yet. But I've already replaced some of these. I think I have a couple more that are junk, or not junk, but spares that I have in my tote. But in any case, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take the vice grips. I'm going to come in here. Okay, we're just going to get in there. We're going to get a good grip on it. I'm going to take an impact, 19mm on the back side. Okay. Now I did already sort of break that loose off camera, but that will absolutely hold it, no problem. Now one thing to note is these on the upper side, where the upper nut is, okay, you have a, I believe Rush has them listed as a ball joint washer. Okay, so this washer, again, this is in there like that. So this is facing up, this is facing down. This washer sits on there, and then the nut goes on, okay? Now there is no washer on the bottom, okay? There's no washer on the bottom, just on top, all right? So that's how you can remove this. Now obviously, it just pulls right out. These things literally just slide in and out, nothing to them. But like I said, sometimes you need to figure out how to hold them steady. And if I show you the one that I just took off, obviously, couple little more marks, but nothing on that edge. Perfectly fine, totally reusable. Okay, obviously you'd want to inspect it, make sure you don't have any cracks or anything. But again, cheap part, so maybe just order a new one and not reuse it. Completely up to you. I like to have spares, even if they're old spares. You never know in a pinch. If I run out of new ones, just like maybe this ball joint that has that minute little bit of play in it, I keep it still, because if I have one that gets completely destroyed and I've got one more race that's really important to me, I could always put this in and save my race or my weekend or whatever. All depends how much risk you want to take, okay? So next comes the next is we're going to end up doing this ball joint replacement, and so I'll be right back to show you that. Okay, so now next comes removing the snap rings. So inside here is 2 snap rings. You can see the holes there. Snap rings, holes there, okay? So we just need to remove them so we can press out the ball joint. So first and foremost, put it back in the vise. Okay, now this is not the normal pair I use. These are just some cheap Cal Hawks. I mean, these things are not that great, but they do the trick, okay? Sometimes you don't need to have the best. But so we're just going to stick these in. Okay. Almost got it. Almost got it again. Okay. So now what I want to show you here is there's 2 different styles of these that I've seen, and so I think the original ones that I got on the car, I'm chassis number 88 for reference, okay? The original ones that I got on the car look like this. Now obviously you can notice there is no, okay, you can see the apparent difference, right? No holes. Okay, now what I want to show you is these are ones that I took off after the impact. See that thing? That thing is bent. You cannot reuse that. That is trash. So what I would highly recommend, and what I went ahead and did, is I got me a pile of them from Rush, ordered them, Blair sent them to me, and these are all this style. So now if I ever have an accident where I have to replace my ball joint and I bent these up, I have spares, gotta have spares, okay? So again, this is the one I just took out. Now there's one on the other side. I'll take it out now. Hopefully it won't fight me too hard here. Sometimes the hardest part is just getting them broken loose so they'll come to you. And sometimes you'll only get like one side out, or okay. I don't think I'm winning. I think it's winning. Again, if I had a better pair of snap ring pliers, or the ones that I have in my trailer, is they are a little bit heavier duty. And what you can do sometimes, and what I might have to do on this one, is take a screwdriver, take you a really small flathead. When you get it squeezed together, before you go to pull it out, you can stick that flathead usually in that gap that you've created somewhere, just like that. There we go. Now I walked it out, all right? And so essentially when I was pulling this out and I was squeezing it, you're just gonna stick that in the side right there and catch it, your gap, and then you can just help it out, okay? And then pretty easy. Now these ones are not bent. They are nice and straight. But again, if I have new ones, I'm probably just gonna replace them. Why not, right? Okay, so, okay, now that I have the snap rings removed, the next step is gonna be pressing out the ball joint. Now these ball joints are pressed in there, but they're not very hard. You do not need to use a press. A vise will work perfectly fine, will hardly take any effort if I'm honest. Maybe you could beat them out with a hammer, but to me, I wouldn't want to beat the new one in, so I'm not going to take the old one out that way. I don't want a chance at dinging up or hurting anything. It just, to me, there's not worth it. So what you're going to need, and what I use personally, is an 1 5/8" socket. Okay, essentially, I just need something that's big enough that the ball joint can fit inside of it, okay? As long as the ball joint can fit inside of it, it's going to be perfect. So whether you have a piece of metal, I don't really care, a round hoop, maybe you have something like this that's that big. I use these for the studs, which I replace all my studs, wheel studs. But for me, 1 5/8" and a 22 millimeter. So the idea of the 22 millimeter is it's big enough that it's not going to touch your ball and it's not going to hurt your surround because it's sitting on this outer surround, so you can push the next one in, okay? So all I'm going to do is, and it's a little bit of a juggling act here, but I'm going to loosen the vise up. Okay. We're going to need to really loosen it up pretty good to give us room for all of this. I'm going to stick this on one end, okay, hold it together, and then this is going to go on the other end. And we're going to keep on going out, okay. So now we're just going to take, again, the open end is going to go, all right, and this is lined up here. Now we can just start snugging the vise up. And again, it's not going to take a lot of pressure, just a little bit. Okay, see, I'm already starting to work it. There we go, it's already out, just like that, that easy. So now, voila, ball joint's out. Okay, and again, as I showed you before, this one, no movement. You cannot move it. This thing is no good. It took that hit when those bolts broke, okay? So now I'm just going to take one of these other ones and put it back in just to show you and illustrate how you put it back together. But so obviously what I would do then is take a rag. You're going to want to wipe this out in here. You can see there's some lithium grease and stuff in there. I like to clean this out, make sure those grooves where your snap ring gets clean real good. You could just take a simple rag, get in there, clean it out, maybe take a screwdriver if you don't have any fingernails, get in there, clean out both of your rings. Okay, nothing to it. All right, but clean it, make sure it's good to go. All right, now that I dropped my socket and picked it up, but so now the idea is same thing. There is no sides on this, they're both the same, so it doesn't matter whether you press it in from either side. There's no lip that's going to accept it or reject it. So all we're going to do is we're going to set it in. We do want to make sure that we get it set in and that it's relatively straight. Okay, I have had one kind of cock a little bit on me when I was trying to put it in. Okay, but I could tell you that that is, I'm not going to use that one. That one's a little mangled up. I'm going to use one of these nicer ones. Okay, so now I'm going to make sure that it's fairly straight, and it is. I'm just looking at it from this profile here. It is fairly straight enough. All right, now I've got the new ball joint set in there. Okay, again, making sure that I have it nice and straight. Okay, so now I no longer need this big guy right here because there's nothing pushing out, okay? What I actually need is to be able to see on the back side. And so what I'm going to do is, again, we're just going to use this one here. I'm going to run the vise in until we get to the point where we're starting to make a little contact so this thing can hold itself together. Line yourself up nice and good, make sure it's okay. Now nice and easy, see it's nice and straight. Now what I want to do is watch on both sides until I can see my snap ring groove line up to where I think I can get my ring in. I think that's about it right there. Let me see here. Maybe just a hair more. And it's okay if you go too far. You can always just stick this socket in the other side, okay? But now the concept here is, so we're just gonna vise this back in here. Now, you know, if this was a new ball joint in there, and this is, you're getting ready to put this thing back together, okay? You're gonna take maybe your new rings or your old rings, and you're just gonna repeat the process in reverse. So I'm just going to squeeze that, okay? Once you get them started to be in there, okay? Now I could tell you that that did not snap in. I need to go in just a smidge more. Okay, so I'm going to leave the snap ring on there. It's going to be perfectly fine. Okay, back it out. This socket will probably help do the deal. Okay, and so again, I'm just need a smidge more. Okay, I just heard the snap ring click into place. So that means I am probably right on the money. And what I want to do is look all the way around. If you look really closely, it's going to go in super duper tight, but then you're going to see there's going to be a spot where it's not going to sink in quite as tight. That is perfectly normal, okay? That is perfectly normal. It is not going to be like that all the way around. It just won't, okay? And I'll show you when we get the other side in. That is in fact the case. Okay, so now I'm going to take my other snap ring that I just took out. All right. And I'm just going to squeeze it, pushing it in with my fingers. Okay, and again, that one is snapped in all the way. I'll show you it as well, so you can see we are very tight right there. You can see it's in a lot, and then you can see the same thing as the other side, and that is perfectly normal. If you don't believe me, feel free to take you a screwdriver and a little hammer and try to tap that ring in, but I assure you it's not going to go in any farther, okay? So there we go. Essentially, I just replaced a ball joint. Now all you would do is get ready to put it back on the car, take you a new stud. Remember, if this was going on the car like this would go in from the bottom, okay? So again, your little ramp section faces down to the ground, okay? So this would go in like this, okay? And sometimes they're a little bit of a bugger, okay? And then you would have your washer, your nut, okay? So that, and then on the bottom side, you're going to, wherever it went, you're going to use this, which bolts to your upright. So again, it's ramped. You're going to put it in the only way that it'll fit, and obviously this is going to go against your upright. This is where your bolts recess in for those upper control arm bolts. And then you would take another one of these nuts, put it on the bottom, okay? And then when you get it on the car and you get everything tight, you'll be able to tighten both nuts down and torque them down to ooga tight. Now one little side note, obviously these are nylon nuts. Just a little personal preference thing that I do, and maybe you noticed on some of these that I have actually worked on. I usually clean them out, but I actually put a little bit of blue Loctite on these things as well as have the nylon. And then, you know, these are actually technically a one-time use nut. So I have big bags of these that I ordered off of Granger, and I can get you the specs. I'll post the specs in the comment on the YouTube channel, so that way you can see the specs to these bolts or nuts, I mean. And there's a big one and a little one. This is a 19 millimeter one, and then there's a 17 millimeter one. These two nuts basically make up most of your suspension components, or bolt most of your suspension components together, or nut them together. Keep saying the word bolt. But yeah, so essentially that is it for the ball joints. All right, that's that. Hope you enjoyed the video. That's how you replace your ball joints, and that's how you inspect your control arms. I'll make another video sometime about how to do these bushings. I've honestly not had to replace any yet thus far, and so that's great. You know, I don't have any play or wiggle on the ones that are on the car, nor any of these that have broken and bent. I still didn't have any play or wiggle in them when I took them off. Now every time I've ever had any problems, just kind of a little side note, is, you know, the whole point of, you know, when you're working on the car and replacing parts over time and breaking things, it's called hashtag race car, right? Is save your hardware, get new hardware. You know, buy loaded control arms instead of bare ones. It'll already come with the ball joint in it if you want. But you know, I think just mix it up. My goal was to be able to have these lowers that I have and this upper that I have. Sorry, cat attacking me. But the goal was obviously to have spare control arms, that way I could rebuild them at the track, that already had bushings in them and whatnot. Now unfortunately my two lowers are trash, and so all I have is this upper, which I don't know if it's trash yet or not, but I'll find out one day. But you know, yeah, so the theory is though is just get new bolts, get hardware, get all that stuff, and then that way you have spares. So now I have spare lowers, spare uppers, spares, you know, spare everything. So spare is the name of the game. Hope you enjoyed the video. We'll see you next time.